Rose Bennett had always been a woman of discipline. A retired financial strategist, she had built her career from the ground up and spent her life making the right choices. But after losing her husband Richard, the world she had known seemed to crumble. The spacious house on Maple Drive, once filled with laughter and love, now felt eerily quiet. Even her son, Elliot, the only family she had left, had become distant, swallowed up by his work in the booming field of biotechnology. Rose spent her days tending to the garden Richard had loved, reading books by the fire, and taking solitary walks around the neighborhood. But beneath the calm exterior, there was a loneliness she couldn't shake. Her heart ached for the kind of companionship she had once known, and she missed the quiet comfort of sharing her life with someone who truly cared. When Elliot called her one Tuesday evening with excitement in his voice, it was like a breath of fresh air. "Mom, I've met someone special," he said, his voice cracking with that rare edge of excitement. "I want you to meet her. How about dinner this weekend?" Rose's heart fluttered at the invitation. She hadn't heard that tone in his voice in years. Not since he was a child excited to show her his latest school project. She agreed to dinner without hesitation, eager to see the spark that had returned to her son's life. The night of the dinner, she stood in front of the mirror, carefully adjusting her outfit. Nothing too fancy, just something comfortable and classy. After all, she was meeting his girlfriend. She wanted to make a good impression, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was because after years of feeling invisible to her son, she wanted to feel important again. The restaurant was upscale, the kind where the waiters wore black suits and spoke in hushed tones. The kind where you couldn't even pronounce half the dishes on the menu. When Elliot walked in, holding hands with a tall, elegant woman, Rose instantly understood why he had been distracted. She was stunning, blonde, poised, and radiated an effortless grace that seemed to outshine everything around her. "Mom, this is Ava," Elliot said, his voice glowing with pride. He had never looked happier. Ava's smile was warm, welcoming, and her handshake firm. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Bennett," she said with a sparkle in her eyes. "Elliot talks about you all the time. I've heard so many amazing things." Rose smiled politely, but a nagging feeling tugged at her heart. "Please call me Rose," she said, though something in her voice hinted at a layer of vulnerability that she rarely showed. As they sat down to eat, Ava hung on Rose's every word, asking questions about her life, her career, and even about Richard's work in engineering. She complimented Rose's vintage Chanel earrings and insisted that they were timeless. Everything she said seemed so perfect, so sincere. It was the kind of attention Rose hadn't received in years. She found herself laughing more than she had in ages. But what struck her the most was the way Ava listened. The way she leaned in, hung on every story, and made Rose feel heard. It was a feeling that Rose hadn't even realized she was missing until Ava had provided it so effortlessly. By the end of the evening, Rose felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had spent hours feeling like someone cared about her opinions and stories. For the first time in years, she felt relevant. Elliot, still glowing from the night, surprised her when they were walking out. "You know, Mom," he said, "Ava has mentioned a few times how much she'd love for you to join us on that cruise to the Caribbean next month. I thought we'd keep it just the two of us, but Ava insists that it would be perfect if we could all go together." Rose's heart swelled. The idea of spending time with Elliot again, on a trip away from the pressures of daily life, seemed like a dream. The invitation felt so warm and inviting. For a moment, she felt like she was part of something important again, like she was included in a vision of the future. She smiled, her voice tinged with emotion. "Of course, I'd love to join you." Over the next few weeks, Rose and Ava grew closer. They went shopping together, spent afternoons over coffee, and shared intimate details about their lives. Ava was the daughter Rose had always wanted, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe that this could be the start of a new chapter, one filled with companionship, love, and perhaps a family she never thought she'd have again. But deep inside, an inkling of doubt gnawed at Rose. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something about Ava's perfection, her seeming eagerness to be the perfect daughter-in-law, made her uneasy. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself she was just being overly cautious. Then came the night before the cruise. Elliot had been busy with work and couldn't make it to dinner, but Ava insisted on meeting with Rose anyway. They went to a small bistro on the edge of town, the kind of place that was intimate and quiet. The evening went well at first. Ava continued to charm Rose with stories of her childhood, her dreams, and her passion for teaching. But when Rose excused herself to use the restroom, something strange happened. She returned to the table, only to find Ava's eyes flicker nervously as she quickly straightened her dress. Rose sat down, not thinking much of it. But as the evening wore on, Rose began to feel disoriented, slightly dizzy, almost like she couldn't focus. Ava, sensing Rose's discomfort, smiled sweetly. "It's probably the stress of the upcoming trip, don't you think?" But Rose wasn't sure. She hadn't felt this way before. Had she been so caught up in the excitement that she hadn't noticed the small, subtle changes in herself? The memory lapses, the odd moments of confusion. As the night ended, Rose tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Something was wrong, she could feel it, and the nagging doubt in her mind had grown too loud to ignore. Ava was everything she had ever wanted in a daughter-in-law, and yet, deep inside, Rose knew that something darker was simmering beneath the surface, and the answer, she feared, might already be waiting for her on the horizon. The morning after the dinner, Rose woke up feeling oddly drained, as though the events of the night before had taken something from her. Her head ached, and a strange sense of dizziness lingered. She chalked it up to the excitement of the upcoming cruise. Maybe she hadn't been sleeping well lately. After all, the anticipation of reuniting with Elliot and spending time with him had been consuming her thoughts. But something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the usual signs of aging, forgetfulness, confusion. It was more subtle, more deliberate. She started noticing small things, forgetting the names of old friends, misplacing her car keys when they'd always been in the same spot, a slight tremble in her hands that wasn't there before. These lapses in memory and physical coordination weren't like anything she'd experienced in the past. At first, Rose dismissed it as a result of stress or perhaps an overactive imagination, but the episodes became more frequent. She tried to talk to Elliot about it, but he was always too busy, too distracted with his work to notice. The few times she did mention her concerns, he brushed them off, claiming she was just overthinking it. The comforting thought that it was simply stress or age seemed less convincing with each passing day. It wasn't until Rose's next coffee date with Ava that the pieces began to fall into place. Ava had been nothing but sweet and attentive, as usual. The young woman had arrived with a basket of homemade pastries and a pot of chamomile tea, her idea of calming Rose's nerves, she claimed. They sat in the sunroom, chatting about the upcoming cruise. Ava's excitement was infectious, and for a moment, Rose allowed herself to get caught up in the joy of it all. But as the conversation continued, Rose's head grew heavier. Her vision blurred. She excused herself to the restroom, but the brief moment alone gave her no relief. Her reflection in the mirror looked foreign, as if she had aged a decade in the span of an hour. Her breathing quickened. "What is happening to me?" she whispered to her reflection. When she returned to the table, Ava was waiting with a knowing smile, her eyes glimmering with something Rose couldn't quite identify. Ava didn't seem to notice that Rose was no longer fully present. Her words were slow, disjointed, and Rose found herself zoning out, her thoughts clouded. "Rose," Ava said, her voice almost too sweet, "you know, I'm so glad we're becoming close. I really admire how strong you are. So much of what I've learned in life comes from people like you. And Elliot, he's so lucky to have a mother like you." Rose nodded absently, trying to shake off the fog in her head. She had always prided herself on being independent, but now she felt more vulnerable than ever. Ava's words, though kind, felt empty in some way. They didn't feel genuine anymore. It was as if there was a hidden agenda behind them. "I'll be back in a minute," Rose said, excusing herself once again but not heading to the restroom. Instead, she walked through the house, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion. She needed to think, to piece things together. Why had she been feeling like this? Was it just aging, or was something more insidious happening? In the study, Rose sat at her desk, staring at a photo of Richard, her late husband, the love of her life. The one person who had always been there to ground her, to keep her centered. And now, here she was, sitting alone, trying to hold onto her own sanity. That's when she noticed it. A small, almost unnoticeable change in her daily routine. Her prescription bottles, the ones she had taken for years, seemed off. The pills inside weren't the same as they usually were. She wasn't sure how she'd missed it before, but now, looking at them closely, the shape was slightly different, the color slightly off. Rose's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? She hadn't thought about it until now, but the more she thought about it, the more the pieces fit. The memory lapses, the strange episodes, the disorientation, everything pointed in one direction. Was someone tampering with her medications? A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as she gathered the bottles and examined them more carefully. The names of the pills were the same, but something wasn't right. The pills in her blood pressure medication were a different shape. The antidepressants she'd been prescribed for years looked like cheap substitutes. Before she could think further, Ava appeared in the doorway. She smiled as she leaned against the frame. "Everything okay, Rose?" she asked, her voice soft and laced with concern. Rose's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, but her mind was a jumble of thoughts. Ava had been so kind, so attentive, so perfect, but now it felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her kindness. I think I need some air," Rose said, standing abruptly. She grabbed her purse and walked outside into the garden, her legs shaky beneath her. The cool breeze felt like a temporary relief, but the unease in her chest wouldn't let up. The next day, Rose did what she had been avoiding. She went to the local pharmacy, asked to speak to the pharmacist, and had her medications reviewed. The pharmacist confirmed her worst fear. The medications she had been taking had been switched. The pills she had been consuming for months, the ones that had caused her mental decline, were not the ones her doctor had prescribed. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. She had been poisoned, and not by accident. Someone had been deliberately tampering with her medications. Her hands shook as she left the pharmacy, her mind spinning with questions. Who did this to me? The answer was terrifyingly clear. Ava. The realization that she had been drugged sent shockwaves through Rose. Her hands trembled as she walked back from the pharmacy, clutching the small bag with her altered medications. The world around her felt distant, like she was living in a dream where nothing was real. She had been careful, cautious, but somehow she'd been blinded by Ava's charm, her kindness, and her apparent concern. It was all a lie. That evening, Rose sat in the dimly lit living room, her thoughts swirling. She tried to put the pieces together. When had this started? How had Ava gained access to her medications in the first place? And why had she been doing this? The more Rose thought about it, the clearer it became. The subtle signs of confusion, the random memory lapses, the disorientation that had started in the last few months, it all pointed to Ava. But why? What was her end game? To take control of her life, her wealth. Rose knew that her son Elliot was busy with his career, but surely he couldn't have been part of this. Could he? Her mind raced, and for the first time in a long while, the quiet house felt suffocating. She needed answers, but more than that, she needed to make sure she wasn't slipping further into a haze of confusion. The thought of facing Ava, of confronting her with the truth, filled Rose with a quiet dread. But there was no other option. She couldn't live in fear any longer. The next morning, Rose found herself in front of her computer, searching for any clue, anything that would confirm her suspicions. She scoured medical journals, online forums, and even chatted with a few pharmacists through online consultations. Everything pointed to the same thing. Ava had been poisoning her slowly, using a cocktail of drugs that mimicked the symptoms of dementia and cognitive decline. But there was one piece missing, the reason behind it. Rose sat back in her chair, her mind exhausted, when she heard a soft knock at the door. It was Ava, standing there with a concerned smile, holding a tray of homemade soup. "Rose, sweetheart," Ava said, her voice sweet and innocent. "I brought you some lunch. You didn't seem well last night. I thought you might need something to eat." Rose fought the wave of nausea that washed over her. She took the tray but didn't invite Ava inside. She wasn't sure how much longer she could play along. "Thank you, Ava. I'm not hungry right now. I think I need to rest." Ava's eyes seemed to linger for a moment too long, as if she were searching Rose's face for any signs of suspicion. Then, with a nod, she stepped back. "Okay, Rose, you rest. I'm just a phone call away if you need anything." As soon as the door clicked shut, Rose's resolve hardened. She couldn't let Ava get away with this. She needed to confront her, but not alone. She couldn't trust her own judgment anymore. It was time to bring someone else into the fold, someone who could help her investigate, someone who could keep an eye on Ava. That afternoon, Rose called the only person she trusted completely, her old friend Helen, a retired private investigator who had helped Rose with small matters in the past. Helen had always been sharp, resourceful, and unafraid to dig into the truth. It was time to enlist her help. When Helen arrived later that evening, Rose explained everything. Her strange memory lapses, the way Ava seemed to be taking care of her, but in a way that felt off, and the shocking discovery about her medications. Helen listened carefully, her brow furrowed in concern as she took mental notes. "I'm going to help you, Rose," Helen said after a pause. "We'll find out exactly what's going on, but I need you to trust me, and you can't let Ava know anything. She's clever, and if she thinks we're onto her, she might make a move. We have to be careful." Over the next few days, Rose and Helen set their plan in motion. Helen managed to discreetly install security cameras around the house, particularly in areas where Ava had spent the most time. They also began collecting samples of the food and drink that Ava brought to the house. Helen had a contact at a local lab who could run tests on the substances without raising suspicion. Rose was terrified of what they might find, but she knew it was the only way to get solid proof. Meanwhile, Ava's behavior became increasingly suspicious. She started showing up uninvited, dropping by multiple times a week, always with some excuse to stay longer. She was always attentive, always in control, and Rose noticed how subtly she manipulated conversations. She would often remind Rose to take her pills and would always volunteer to organize things for her. It was as though Ava was trying to take control of every aspect of her life, without Rose even realizing it. One day, as Rose was preparing to leave the house for a short walk, she saw Ava slip something into her water bottle. Her heart dropped. This was it. Ava had just poisoned her again, right under her nose. But this time, Rose was ready. When Ava left to take a call outside, Rose grabbed the water bottle and quickly hid it in the kitchen. She knew she had to act fast. She called Helen, who arrived within minutes. They took the bottle to the lab immediately. The results came back later that evening. The water was laced with a powerful cognitive inhibitor, one that caused confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. It was a slow-acting poison designed to mimic the symptoms of early-stage dementia. Rose was in shock. Her instincts had been right. Ava had been systematically poisoning her to gain control of her life and fortune. "I'm going to confront her tomorrow," Rose said to Helen, her voice steady but filled with rage. "I can't let her do this to me anymore." Helen nodded. "I'll be here. We'll handle this together." The next day, as Rose sat in the living room, waiting for Ava to arrive, she went over everything in her mind. She had to be strong. She had to confront the woman who had wormed her way into her life and tried to destroy everything she had built. Ava walked in, as usual, with that perfect smile on her face. "Rose, you're looking much better today. I brought you some homemade juice just like you like." Rose stood up, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Ava, I know what you've been doing." Ava's smile faltered, but only for a second. "What are you talking about, Rose?" Rose looked her in the eye. "I know you've been poisoning me. I know you've been tampering with my medications, switching them out and making me lose my mind. I have the proof. You've been slowly trying to kill me so you can take everything I have." Ava's eyes darkened. "You don't understand, Rose. This was never personal. I had to do it. For Elliot, for the future." "I don't care what your excuses are," Rose said, her voice cold. "I'm done, and you're going to pay for what you've done." Before Ava could react, Helen appeared from the hallway, her phone in hand, ready to call the authorities. Ava's expression turned to one of fury as the reality of her situation sank in. But it was too late. The web she had woven around Rose had unraveled, and now she would face the consequences. Ava's face shifted from shock to anger, but Rose stood her ground, her back straight, her heart pounding with the knowledge that she was finally taking control. Helen was right behind her, calm but resolute, phone in hand, ready to call the authorities at a moment's notice. The air between them crackled with tension, thick with the weight of the truth finally coming to light. "You don't understand," Ava spat, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and fear. "This was never supposed to happen this way. I loved Elliot. I loved him, and I did this for us." "For you, you mean," Rose countered sharply. "You wanted to steal my life, destroy my mind, so you could take everything I've built. But it's over, Ava. You're not getting away with it." Ava's eyes flickered toward the door, as if calculating an escape route, but she knew it was too late. The walls were closing in, and Rose could feel the satisfaction of having finally seen through Ava's carefully crafted mask. Ava took a step forward, her voice lowering, dripping with false sincerity. "I never wanted to hurt you, Rose. I thought you'd understand. I thought I could make you see it was all for the future, for the family. I needed Elliot's inheritance. He doesn't understand what we need." "You needed my money," Rose said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "And you were willing to destroy everything I hold dear to get it. You don't care about Elliot. You don't care about me. You only care about yourself." Ava's face turned red with anger, her carefully constructed composure cracking. "You don't know anything about me," she hissed, eyes blazing with resentment. "You have no idea what it's like to have nothing, to be used and discarded by people who should care about you. I've worked so hard, played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect woman, and it was never enough. All I wanted was a future with Elliot, a future where I could be somebody, where I could have everything that's been denied to me." "And how many people did you have to destroy to get there?" Rose asked, her voice steady. "Your uncle, Robert Hughes. You've used everyone in your path, and now it's my turn, isn't it?" Ava's eyes widened, and for the briefest moment, Rose saw something shift, something like fear. She took a step back, realizing she'd gone too far. She had underestimated Rose just like she had underestimated everyone else who wasn't a part of her plans. "You think you can just throw me away just like that?" Ava asked, her voice soft now, almost pleading. "You don't know what I've been through, what I've had to survive." Rose wasn't moved. She had spent too many years watching people manipulate and lie to her to feel sorry for a woman who had tried to poison her for profit. "I know enough," Rose said, her voice hard as steel. "I know you've been systematically drugging me, replacing my pills, feeding me toxins to cloud my mind. I know about the videos you made of my moments of confusion, the ones you were planning to use against me to get control of my assets. You underestimated me, Ava, and now you'll pay for it." At this, Ava's facade cracked. She snapped, a final desperate attempt to regain control. "You think I care about the law, about the consequences? You've been blind, Rose, blind to what Elliot and I could have had together. He was always so distant, so consumed by his work. I was the one who kept him grounded, who made him feel needed. You just—" She paused, her voice rising in fury. "You just kept him from me, kept him away, and now I'll take what's mine." In an instant, Rose knew that Ava wasn't just a liar or a manipulator. She was a woman who had been so consumed by her own selfish desires that she was willing to destroy everything, even the life of the person who had tried to love her like a daughter. Helen, who had been silently watching, finally spoke. "It's over, Ava. You don't get to have a future anymore. Not like this." Ava's face twisted in anger, and for a moment, Rose feared she might lash out. But then, as if realizing she had lost, she slumped into the chair. Her body seemed to deflate as her bravado faded. There was nothing left to fight for. "You're a monster," Rose said, her voice unwavering. "And you've been playing this game for far too long, but not anymore." Ava didn't respond. She just sat there, defeated, her head hanging low. The fight had drained out of her, and now all that remained was the grim realization of her failure. Helen made the call to the authorities. It didn't take long for the security team to arrive, accompanied by the ship's captain. The ship was docked in Miami, and as Ava was led away in handcuffs, Rose felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had faced the monster, and she had won. But the victory was bittersweet. Rose had almost lost everything. The thought of losing Elliot, of letting someone like Ava into their lives, had nearly cost her her sanity and her life. But now, with the truth out in the open, she could begin to rebuild. Elliot, who had been unaware of Ava's manipulations, arrived at the scene, his face pale and drawn. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, what he was seeing. His mother, the woman who had raised him, had been poisoned by the woman he had planned to marry. "Mum, I don't know what to say," he said, his voice choked with guilt. Rose reached out to him, her hand resting gently on his. "Elliot, you were manipulated too. Don't blame yourself. We'll figure this out together. We've got each other." Elliot nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." Rose smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "It's not too late, son. We still have time to heal."